Greetings. I come to you today having been unceremoniously banned from LinkedIn, which is my primary social media platform, for I believe the third time. Yeah, I think it's the third time. I've no idea what offence I am guilty of on this occasion. I wasn't aware of what offence I was guilty of on the previous two occasions either, because they don't give you information so that you can better moderate what you say and how you act on the platform to prevent it from happening again. Although I do have my suspicions as to what has gone on, which I shall not go into on a public forum. So what relevance does this have to you? Well, if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you're not going to be able to do so anymore. I mean, I may get my account back, but this has really lit the fire under my backside to stop relying on social media as a source of lead generation for my business. So Jess and I are working on some things in the background to reduce that reliance. So you will be seeing less and less of me on there, and that's just if I get my account back, which I may well not. So if you are not on my email list, I strongly advise you subscribe now. You can do so via the link that is displayed on the screen if you're watching, or www.philtyman.co.uk/report if you're not. There's also a link in the description of this video. There is a bribe for you when you sign up, which is my report, How to Build Muscle and Strength the Natural Way. I've been told by a number of people who have used it that it is very, very good. So there you are. Gonna have to download it, judge for yourself. I do email every day, just to be clear, sometimes multiple times per day, typically towards the end of the month or if I've got a sale or other promotion on. So if you do find getting emails about something that you profess to care about very stressful, then you can unsubscribe. And you can even unsubscribe as soon as you've got the report in your hands if you want. But as you're listening to this because you're someone who follows me on social media, I suspect you will find the emails that I write valuable. I hope you do. That's my intention when I write them. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was kind of what this actually means more broadly in terms of conversations around health and fitness on the internet. And as the internet is the modern public square, what they mean, conversations on this topic generally among people. Because if people like me are getting kicked out of social media platforms, that's broadly suggestive of public opinion on the sort of things that I say and others like me say. No, I'm not saying there's some grand conspiracy or anything like that. I just believe that the narrative around things like weight loss, around things like the effect of not training has on your longevity, i.e., you're quite far more likely to get very ill and potentially disabled or even die prematurely of various illnesses, weird and wonderful illnesses, if you don't train than if you do. But when you say this clearly, openly, you get kicked off of the platform because it upsets people greatly, certain people greatly. And there's actually fairly good psychological model underpinning why this happens, why people get quote unquote triggered by the sort of things that people like me say, do, write. And it's by a chap called Carl Rogers, who was a eminent psychologist of the 20th century. And it's from his humanistic theory of personality. And basically what it is it's this idea of congruence. So being a congruent person or an incongruent person. So what you need to think about is everyone has this idealized image of themselves called the ideal self. So it's the person that you aspire to be. Yeah, that's your ideal self. And there's also your self-image. So your self-image is basically the product of your actions, how you actually behave in the world and kind of the feedback that you get from that. And the closer these two overlap, the more congruent a person is and the higher their self-esteem, the better they feel about themselves. Whereas when these two ideas, this self-image and ideal self, are very far apart, you have what's called an incongruent person. That disparity causes cognitive dissonance, which is why people get very upset when I say what I do about fitness and the consequences of not looking after it. So to give you a bit of a worked example, if you imagine the typical man, family man, he's got 2 kids and a wife, he likely thinks of himself as hardworking, disciplined, someone who cares greatly about how he is seen by his children and by his partner, spouse. That's his ideal self. That's the man he aspires to be. But in reality, he eats poorly, is haphazard at best with his training, lies in at every opportunity, goes to bed late, spends far too much time staring at social media. That's who he actually is. That's his self-image. So when you point out that disparity by saying, well, look, Dave, let's pretend he's called Dave, what you are doing is inconsistent with this idealized vision of who you want to be. I'm not saying you're a bad person or anything. I'm just saying that your actions are inconsistent with who you profess that you want to be. Well, that causes a lot of cognitive dissonance, which causes people tremendous psychological distress. They get very triggered, and in some cases, they report whoever said it, i.e., me, to a social media platform that they are posting on, and then that person gets banned. Not saying that someone called Dave reported me. This is a hypothetical, just for the avoidance of doubt. But this is what I suspect happens. So what can we learn from this? Well, ultimately, we want to be congruent people, right? We want to be congruent with our ideal self. We want to, we want to act in accordance with our ideal self. Now, there is no such thing as a perfectly congruent person. Carl Rogers is very clear to make this point in his writings. There's no such thing as a perfectly congruent person. I'm not a perfectly congruent person. I would suggest that I'm more congruent than the average man, because words on the internet poking holes at me or my actions don't affect me because I know they're not true. But I'm also fully aware of where I fall short. And the difference between someone like me, and I hope someone like you, and the people complaining about others on social media and having them kicked off to fundamentally making it harder for them to provide for their families if they have them, or just keep themselves fed and housed, is that we are happy to continue working towards that ideal self. And when we see where we're falling short, when we identify where we're falling short, we work to close the gap. That's the thing. We work to close the gap. But what I'm saying is, if you aspire to be this hardworking person who's in great shape, who's doing everything he can for himself and his family, then you got to act like it. You got to act like it every day. Got to act like it every day. And increasingly, people aren't. That's my read on the situation. We're living in a world where people are not behaving in line with who they want to be, and the messaging from employers, from governments, from peers, from parents in many cases is, well, don't worry about that. You know, it's what you say that matters. Aspiring to this is enough. We don't say that, no, it's not enough to aspire. You actually have to do the damn thing. You actually have to do the damn thing. And I will never compromise on that message, even if it's to my commercial disadvantage. I could do much better on platforms like LinkedIn if I perhaps made less of a deal about the real causes of obesity, weakness. That's weakness of mind, body, and spirit. Probably do much better. I'd probably make more sales. Probably wouldn't get kicked off, which is a prerequisite to making sales from those platforms, but I digress. But part of me, there is a big part of me that just will not do that. I will not say, I will not say what needs to be said. Because, let's just go back to this idea of congruence, I would experience tremendous cognitive dissonance if I went onto a social media platform and started to say things like, well, if you're fat, it's not really your fault. It's big food and big pharma, and it's the government's fault. And oh, isn't your life so hard, precious Petal? I understand. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. I'd be a lot more popular if I did that, but I would experience horrific cognitive dissonance if I did, because my ideal self is a man who tells the truth. I will always tell the truth, and when I know that I'm not telling the truth to the best of my ability, it causes me psychological distress. So I go back to telling the truth. So, bit of a short one today, 11 minutes. Bit of pop psychology for you, but yeah, that's all I've got. This emergency broadcast. So please, if you are interested in following me on, if you're following me, not on social media, because I'm not on social media at the moment, am I? But if you're interested in learning from me and learning from what I teach, then please get yourself subscribed to my email list. As I say, link is in the description, link is on the screen. Get a bribe when you do, because ultimately my aim is to equip you with the tools that you need to get fitter, stronger, healthier, more aesthetically pleasing for your own sake and the sake of your family if you have one. And even my free stuff is created with all that in mind. Now, obviously, it's not as detailed or specific as what I give to my clients who pay me money because, well, I need to keep a roof over my head and I'm a business, not a charity. But I dare say I put a lot more detail into my stuff than many of my competitors. I'm certainly far more open about my methods and manner than in my in because ultimately it's advertising material in my advertising material, so that people who do decide to work with me have made an informed decision. Something else that, again, is very important that I do for purposes of integrity and to remain congruent. There are also, if you don't want the emails, there's, what is it? It's got to be around 300. I keep saying this. I think it's circa 300. It might be just over 300. If you're listening to this in 6 months' time after I record it, it's certainly going to be over 300 articles on my site. For transparency, those are mainly repurposed emails, almost entirely repurposed emails. So that will give you some flavour of what you'd be letting yourself in for if you do decide to subscribe to the list. But equally, if you don't want emails because you don't like getting emails, then the website's there, the articles library's there for you to have a look around. And then, of course, if you really wanted to help me out, you could purchase one of my books or one of my newsletter series or subscribe to the Bill Tyreman letter. That would be ace if you did that. The sales pages for those can be found on my site as well. They're quite long sales pages. They're written in kind of the old school copywriting marketing style. But again, that's to make sure that your decision to buy is an informed one. I'd rather you didn't buy if you weren't 100% happy with what you're potentially going to be getting. But yeah, if you wanted to help me out by buying a book or a newsletter or subscribing to the newsletter, that would be most excellent. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough now, and that was quite the pitch at the end. But frankly, I don't care. So whatever you're doing today, have a good one.